Thanks very much for inviting me to come and talk about this project that I've been working on for the last year, Trash to Cash, EU Horizon 2020 project. And the presentation is going to take us on a little tour around 5 different cities in Europe, looking at the way in which we've been considering how to redesign regenerated cellulosic fibres for high-end luxury products. I'm director of a research centre. I'm a practice-based textile researcher. I've been working at the university for 20 years now. I set up, I've been running a group for the last 20 years called TED, Textiles Environment Design. We're in the process finally of changing the name because there's an American version of TED I've heard of that's quite big. We have got Textile Futures Research Centre for the last 6 years, and that's drawing together the researchers across Central St Martin's with Chelsea and other researchers at the University of the Arts. And in the last 6 years, through chance really, I've been working a lot with the Swedes, primarily through working in education, basically educating and training designers at H&M and other big brands in sustainable design and sustainable design thinking techniques. Today I'm here to talk about Trash to Cash in my role as Work Package 8 leader, which is for communications. As a textile designer, I find it quite weird that I've ended up working essentially in the communication design field. But it's because we're textile designers who have, in the last few years, been strategizing in companies, trying out ideas and understanding that what we need to do is build bridges, communicate, and come up with common language, common goals, ways in which we can make design actually work in these companies. So Martin asked me to come along and talk about the cellulosics to sort of form a picture around the biological cycle. After seeing the technical cycle of steel, thank you, that was an excellent, really interesting presentation. We're interested in looking today at these fantastic materials, regenerated cellulosics, and how they're going to be helping us really plug the cotton gap that we're going to have in the future. I'm a polyester head. I've worked in polyester for 20 years, so this whole cellulosics field is very new to me. I was thrilled when I started working with Inventia in Sweden to find that essentially wood pulp could become really strong, clear, liquid materials. And I've been very interested in understanding the similarities and differences between polyester, very much the technical cycle, and the cellulosics, which derive from the biological cycle. I don't have to spell this out to this audience, thankfully. I have been spelling it out for 20 years to my students and my clients, of course. But what the environmental situation means for fashion and textiles is that we are at peak cotton point. We can't grow any more cotton for the expanding population who are developing better tastes or more evolved tastes. Cotton is a much loved fibre. It needs too much land, basically. So we have to find other fibres, and we have to find ways to reuse the amount of cotton that we can make. And in terms of the technical cycle, polyester is over half of global production of fibres, and of course it comes from oil. I won't expand upon that, but you can understand that that comes with a great price tag. I suppose the great thing now, after working in the field for a long time, working now with scientists and industry stakeholders, is we're beginning to really exploit the opportunities now, to really understand what this situation will bring. And the circular economy, the discussion around the circular economy is really accelerating that. So the greatest opportunities that I've been seeing working in Sweden and more recently with Finnish partners is, of course, tree and tree stock, and the fact that we can produce a fibre that's very similar in many ways to cotton from an abundant, naturally replenishing source. And in terms of polyester, we've already produced enough polyester to survive for eternity. We can recycle polyester without any great degradation in quality, and we are finding many, many more ways of doing that. What we can't do is get it back. And again, coming back to supply, which we will talk about many times in this presentation, for any of the projects working in the circular economy, it's always the same thing. How are we going to redesign the supply chain? How are we going to get this stuff back? It's no small sector. I put this slide in because in my university, I often have to reiterate to the other fields and my colleagues actually how large this sector is. Fashion and textiles sector is the second most impactful in terms of chemicals and water globally. And we may blame fast fashion for that, but of course it's a much bigger set of issues than what people like H&M are producing and putting on the shop floor. Polyester is something I'm very familiar with in a hands-on way, and we've been seeing recycled polyester on our shop floor for the last 5 to 8 years in a pretty regular way. It's very easy to recycle polyester, essentially, and there is a market there. Teijin has been sort of one of the most cited examples of how we can produce a recycled polyester, producing a brand new kind of supply chain. It blends really well, it's a cheap fibre, it's in nearly everything that we're wearing. And yet we've got such big problems on the horizon because we've just put elastin and everything. So the biggest selling garments, volume-wise, at H&M is a pair of black cotton stretch jeans. They sell gazillions of units. They've all got elastin in. As soon as they're getting that stock back now in their new recycling scheme, they're finding that the elastin is diminishing the ability to reclaim a fibre from both mixing it in polyester products and from mixing it in cotton products. So you may love your stretch jeans, but we are creating a hell of a problem with those stretch jeans. Cellulosics give us something very different. We're deriving cellulosic fibres from wood pulp, and the new work is actually looking at paper and old cotton clothing to give us a regenerated version of the cellulosic fibre. In the Trash to Cash project, we're working with scientists and technologists from Finland who have developed IonCell F, which is a new sort of chemical solution which is better than how we're currently producing viscose and lyocell, like Tencel. But it has both fibre types, both material types have very particular problems that we're beginning to start to address. As soon as we think about materials in these cycles, what we realise is it's contradictory. So we place polyester in a technical cycle, but actually polyester comes from oil over millions of years. That's actually from originally from the biological cycle. We can produce cellulosics from wood pulp in the biological cycle, but as soon as we make that into a fibre and a fabric, it goes to the technical cycle. So our biggest challenges really are to understand what we're doing with these materials and how they're moving between these cycles, and really see that as an opportunity for design innovation. Polyester will never go away. It's too easy to work with. It's too functional, and it will probably stay reasonably priced for the next 50 years. It gives us something that's wearable, that doesn't need a huge amount of ironing or washing, but we have big problems with it as consumers, and we don't appreciate really the way in which it wears over time. For example, it pills, and as soon as your Patagonia fleece or your Marks and Spencer's fleece starts pilling, it's pretty much reached its end of its life. That might be 6 months, when we know the material itself is going to be around for 200 years. So designing this circular supply chain and getting the chemistry right for regenerating polyester is going to be extraordinarily important. For cellulosics, we're finding that because of their short staple, they are soft, there's a cooling effect in hot weather, we can produce shiny or peach skin effects, it dyes incredibly well, it's breathable, and if we're using waste, its supply is going to be abundant. But it's slow drying, it doesn't act well with water. It fades and there's an abrasion effect through wearing, and it has a big user problem. The perception is that it's low quality compared to something like silk. So, with that painting the material attributes picture, how are designers responding to that, and how are they finding the opportunities, and how are they then going to work with scientists to improve these attributes? My group have been working on design strategies, like I said, for the last 20 years, and in 2010 we came up with TEDS 10, which is 10 strategic approaches to designing sustainable fashion and textiles. If you want to find out more, I've got some with me today. Dr. Kate Goldsworthy has been working with recycled polyester through her PhD, which she completed about 7 years ago, I think, mapping out these loops within loops within loops for polyester, her particular approach using laser technology and laser finishing. Other researchers in our group are taking cellulosics and making short life materials, because I completely agree with the ambition and the vision for extending the life of the products that we're making. We all know that that is very important for product efficiency, but it doesn't work with fashion all the time. It doesn't work with democratic views on fashion. It works with high-end, luxury and niche. So what about everybody else? What about the emerging economies? What about India in 10 years' time? What are we actually going to be wearing? And how are we going to account for people's ever-changing needs to express themselves? Young people need to change the way that they look. They explore their own characters through change. We are going to need to understand much more about short and rapid and fast materials and cycles, as much as seeking to be able to really maximise the way in which a wool coat might circulate over time. So researchers from my group are working with Mistra Future Fashion on really understanding the potential for short life, new approaches to fast fashion, working with LCA researchers from Sweden. We've made new materials which use cellulosic fibres in paper making, traditional Swedish paper making processes, and then taken that new paper material through textile processes like indigo dyeing, pleating, and created clothing that can be discarded after a week. It can be composted, it can be recycled. This work is ongoing, and whenever I present an argument for fast fashion, I have to literally get booed off stage. It's still a really contentious idea, but I do hold on to the fact that human nature doesn't really change that much over time, and the success of fast fashion in the last 10 years shows us that we really do need to think much more about fast loops as well as extending life. One of our radical PhD researchers is looking at how cellulosics can be created at home to literally give you a way to be a material activist, to make cellulosic film and clothing at home. And she actually sort of takes ideas from working, from collaborating in a lab situation in Sweden, sort of back home to her kitchen. And another one of our researchers, Dawn Elands, is looking at cellulosics and keeping trying to keep the cellulosic material in the biological cycle, or consciously colouring it in such a way that it goes into the technical cycle in a more beneficial way. So she's identified an interdisciplinary cyclical design approach which looks at the hotspots for fabric production, fibre, colour finishing and garment textile, maps that sort of approach together, and by working with a scientist on cellulosic fibre, kind of came up with this new approach, this interdisciplinary knowledge research framework, working between science, garment production and design. It looks like this. She's taking a cellulosic material and she's dyeing it using the plant matter itself. So Tencel is made from eucalyptus leaves. She's actually taking the dye stuff, the residual leftover coloured water from the process of making the fibre. She's taking that and making it into the dye stuff for the fibre. So everything she's doing is keeping it in the same biological loop. When she crosses over to the technical cycle, she's digitally printing faded effects onto Tencel jeans, but she's adding a chemical component to that material. The real gurus, I think, in terms of the cellulosic design field, are based in Finland, Aalto Arts, and they've been experimenting with cellulosics by working within their network. Essentially, Aalto Arts, Aalto Chem, VTT, this Finnish consortium, have been using design-driven ideas to really push and to question and to inform the way in which the scientific exploration is taking place. This work on the right I want to highlight. Very interesting if you're thinking about trying to keep this material in the biological cycle, trying to make the purest, sort of most sustainable replacement for cotton in the future. In this, we're taking, the researcher is taking old cotton garments, sorting them into colour types, and then actually using the original colour from the old cotton garments as a way of keeping colour into the recycled, regenerated cellulosic. Which leads me to Trash to Cash, and to sort of put this big picture to you of how we, in a consortium situation, bringing waste materials in from the paper-making industry, so bringing in pulp and cardboard waste, as well as old textiles, and then working on a regenerated fibre process, there we go, in collaboration with the scientists, and producing a new cellulosic material and a polyester fibre into a high-value product, and driven really by design. So the point of this Trash to Cash project is that we develop a methodology. And it was great to listen to our speaker before talk about the fact that Horizon 2020 projects are looking at brand new methods for how we drive redesign really of the supply chain and the products. So in this project, we're front-ending the scientific experiments with design insights and design demands. I'll show you a little bit of how that looks in practice through the workshops. Workshop 1 in Stockholm, we met the scientists, the designers, the industry partners, and the Finnish scientists, as well as the Swedish LCA researchers, all met and spent 2 days in this quite intense workshop situation. This was new to me, Iron Cell F. Understanding that Tencel is made by lensing, but it's patented and it's protected, and there's sort of various people trying to come up with their own version. It's so important because viscose, which is currently the product of cellulosic fibre production, uses quite a harmful chemical substance. Iron Cell F improves on that chemical substance. It improves on what Tencel is produced with as well, making the best rated recycled fibre. It was a lot to take in, especially for the designers, to suddenly start thinking in terms of chemistry and volatility. But Alto Arts have already been doing it, and that by getting our hands on and looking at these results, we could really understand that if we were able to talk to the scientists and actually engineer the way that the fibre was going to be produced, we could bring a fabric to the market that would be of the quality and in line with what consumers and users really want. Mariana has, in this project, worked with brown cardboard, kept its original colour, and ended up with something that feels like cashmere. This is brown cardboard waste turned into an incredible knitted material, keeping the original colour. And then she's used natural dyes to over-dye, not to bleach to get white, but to over-dye using natural dyes, the other colour palette, and knitted those in. This is the way in which we're looking at how we can use paper, card, waste, bring it back to the market and keep it as close to that biological cycle as we possibly can. So for me, that set the bar very high at the beginning of the project. In Prato, the 35 or so researchers split into two groups, each table taking a fibre type. This is the polyester table, this is the cellulosic table, and worked through this sort of breakdown of attributes. Everybody brought samples in, we broke the samples down, we really started to think about what makes a polyester, what makes a cellulosic, what's its strengths, and it was all based on bringing materials that very experienced people liked and had worked with and had found sort of successful and inspiring. In Helsinki, the thing I remember is really the conversation around supply chain. If we're not going to be able to get this stuff back, we're never going to be able to make this technology work. So since then, actually, some of the early results from Helena has been looking at 1 tonne of fashion waste and breaking down the component parts of that. She found that there were 112 different types of fabric in 1 tonne of waste. And how many is she saying on this slide? This is an old slide, it's actually changed almost overnight when she's recounting. 90 different blends. This is really important information because if there's 90 different blends of fabric in 1 tonne, that's 90 different types of recycling technology needed. So the blending of our fibres for our clothes is creating these enormous problems for the future. In Milan, we started to really, after 9 months of working together, really understand each other a lot more. I mean, there's the designers, there's the scientists, and then there's the end users, the companies. And actually, even within that, there are these different, very different approaches and very different ideas. So the designers, there's sort of UAL, and then there's University of Arts London, and then there's Alto Arts, and then there's also Van Berlo, based in the Netherlands. So even within the design team on this project, there's 3 different sort of methodologies, experiences, ideas. So we're doing a lot of bridge building, and here I'm interviewing Julie for a podcast series. This workshop took place in Material Connections, which is a fantastic materials library that you know, of course. And this is Neria from Ceditech looking through the materials and again using the hands-on approach to feeling cellulosics and feeling polyester to actually develop the conversation and the ideas. And the last one, before the next one that happens in 10 days' time, was in Copenhagen. And that was hosted by Copenhagen Business School. And this is, for both the Mistra project and, I think, for the Trash to Cash, the most important partner for us. Because Copenhagen Business School in the centre, the CSR department, which is sort of world famous for the standard of its research, is really dispelling the myths around what people do with their clothes, how they act, how they use their clothes, why they buy, why they don't buy. And again, relating to your talk, absolutely about if it's not fit for purpose, if people don't want it, if we don't really understand the fashion consumer and the way that textiles are used, we're kind of wasting our time. So these guys, for me, are really driving the design questions which then will feed into the scientific briefs that are going to be created in the project. And I asked a few of the researchers to give me their insights at this sort of 1-year point of the project. And Rosie said something really interesting. It just doesn't go away, the sense that we can have these new materials from waste. These guys, the Orange Fibre, are one of the Global Change Award winners funded by the H&M Foundation. They're making this fibre from citrus peel waste. The orange juice industry, huge amounts of citrus waste, can't be easily composted in food composting because of its acidity. They're making a fibre from it. And it goes on, as you know, it's coffee ground waste, it's milk fibre. These are the big opportunities for us and our clothes for the next 20 years. And so on to London, and in 10 days' time when we all meet again and we carry on these conversations. And what's happened in the interim is we sort of had 8 mega trends that we explored together. We've broken those down into different groups, and now we have about 20 design concepts that the design partners have been working on in conversation with the science partners to produce briefs, which then will get either voted in or get voted out. And at that point, all done in a very democratic sort of roundtable way, we'll have the final set of design briefs to then hand to the scientists for them to then actually develop the materials. I'm probably running short of time, so I'm just going to wrap up now and happy to take any questions. But looking at one of the biggest outcomes from the project will be the design-driven material innovation model. I really hope we get incredible fibres and materials from waste with visions for luxury high-end products too, so it genuinely can be trash to cash. Terrible name, didn't come up with it, learning to live with it. But, you know, it's that sort of old word upcycling, which we don't really use very much anymore. This is a sort of scientific, methodological version, if you like, of upcycling. But we're doing it cross sectors and we're doing it cross discipline, and we're having to find whole new ways of working. Of course, coming up with the ideas is one thing, but actually being able to upscale is the other. And unless we work across fields with the supply chain and the sourcing and the bring-back mechanisms, we kind of haven't got a hope. So what we haven't got in the consortium, which probably is the next project, is systems designers. We actually need more of the supply chain being redesigned, as well as the products. So I just finished with that. Final comment: to find out more, please listen to the podcasts on iTunes and read our blog, etc. But also the conference that I'm hosting at Tate Britain, 23rd, 24th of November, in just a couple of weeks, is really looking at design for the circular economy for fashion and textiles, and lots of trash to cash work there, as well as niche to future fashion. And I think 12 different countries, 35 different papers, all from designers in the fashion textile sector. Not to tread on your toes, Mark. Okay, thank you.